Part 35. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mocienu. Chapter 341. Looking at the devastated mountains and rivers, Muchu's back wings were lifted, and a large piece of black flame surged, slowly landing on the ground covered by black shadows. The shrill roars of corpse beasts and monsters kept coming to my ears. I saw dark arms stretching out from the depths of the earth, dragging these monsters with rotting flesh into the depths of the underground where there was no sunlight. There were also huge black shadow monsters constantly emerging around, fighting and entangled with the corpse beasts and monsters all over the ground. These corpse beasts and monsters were ferocious by nature, and they just wanted to tear apart some creatures in front of them. Even the black shadow soldiers were no exception. But these black shadow monsters wrapped in ink-like darkness were like a thorn in the flesh. When the corpse beasts tore a black shadow monster with their sharp teeth and claws, more black shadow monsters would follow behind them. And on the gradually shattering earth behind, countless alien human races were invaded by darkness. The endless darkness released from the shadow world is spreading rapidly. Looking at the scene around him that looked like a doomsday massacre, Muchu suddenly let go of the void sword in his hand. The hideous void giant blade turned into silver-white beams of light in the air and dissipated at the moment of falling. And a beam of blood-colored light flashed in front of Muchu's chest, and came into Muchu's hand like a beam of lightning. Then, the blood light faded, and a blood-colored demon sword with a narrow blade appeared in Muchu's hand. The blood spread on the blade, as if a greedy and bloodthirsty ghost was baring its blood teeth and fangs. Muchu raised the blood blade of the demon sword in his hand and suddenly inserted it into the dark earth under his feet. In an instant, the whole land seemed to be stained with blood. With the demon sword rooted in the ground as the center, the bright red blood spread around the earth. Countless blood-red silk threads surged on the earth like blood vessels. The vitality of the entire land was also being rapidly eroded and deprived by the demon sword. Although this world is just an illusion space built with soul energy and cannot be compared with the real world. But this is the best supplement for the Yama demon sword. In just a few breaths, blood threads spread rapidly on the surface of the earth, and the red blood lines like spider webs were everywhere. In an instant, the dark earth turned into a sea of blood. And the exposed surface of the demon sword also became as if it had been soaked in a river of blood, and the crimson blood soaked the entire blade. Muchu stood in the sea of blood, his face calm, and he still held the handle in his hand. The next second, a shattering sound came from his ears, and the dark and silent space around him began to turn into fragments. The entire space shattered in an instant, and the infinite soul energy all flowed into the blood blade of the demon sword. Muchu was standing alone in the silent darkness, and the whole world was shattered with him as the center. When everything in front of him was annihilated, a fist-sized green stone gradually emerged in front of Muchu. Touching the surface of the stone, he felt the strong life energy emanating from it, and the chaotic information about the mountains, rivers, and plants immediately entered Muchu's mind. The evolution process of the entire valley jungle secret realm was like a book in Muchu's eyes. He knew that this was the world seed that condensed the last vitality of the fragments of this world. The space-time illusion constructed by the entire stone statue space was also thanks to it. And now, as the soul illusion was completely devoured by the demon sword, the core of the illusion was also revealed. The blood blade of the demon sword in his hand kept trembling, as if a hungry skeleton evil ghost was greedily devouring the creature in front of him. "Okay, you have eaten enough." Patting the handle in his hand, the demon sword flashing with blood stopped shaking immediately. Muchu thought for a moment and did not let the incomplete world seed be swallowed by the demon sword. To be precise, this seed only contains the luck and vitality of this dense forest world, which is far from the level of an entire world. But for Muchu, this is already a considerable fortune. The box of the monsters on his chest shone, and Muchu put the world seed in the box of the monsters. The upgraded box of the monsters is not only the scabbard for the demon sword Yan Mo, but also a huge storage space. The weapons and items stored in it can not only ensure that the shape is not affected, but the box of the monsters can also nourish them. It is not only one level higher than ordinary space props. With the disappearance of the world seed, the last cornerstone supporting this space is also completely destroyed. A bright passage suddenly appeared in front of Mu-Chiu, and on both sides were endless dark abysses. At the end of the passage, a bright door could be vaguely seen, which seemed to be the only tunnel to leave this world. Mu-Chiu looked calm, and he was already walking on the bright passage. It was strange that the moment Mu-Chiu stepped on it, a crisp sound like water drops falling to the ground came out. Then, the whole passage was filled with the sound of Mu-Chiu's footsteps. As Mu-Chiu's figure continued to approach the direction of the light door, a familiar figure suddenly appeared in front of him. A beautiful woman in a white dress appeared in front of the passage. The woman tied her long hair behind her head, but it still couldn't hide her beautiful face. The long skirt she was wearing had become torn in the continuous battles. And this figure was the fairy Fanyan known to Mu-Chiu, known as the Wind Spirit Sword Princess. Fanyan was really embarrassed at the moment, with wounds of varying sizes all over her body, and her hair on her forehead was even more messy, as if she had experienced a shocking battle. The Wind Spirit Sword Princess, who was once admired by thousands of people, was now holding a mithril longsword and staggering on the passage. The next second, Fanyan, who was seriously overdrawn, could no longer withstand the load, stumbled and fell to the ground, and her vision gradually blurred. On her full chest, a dark green jade pendant was constantly flashing dazzling light. And all this was seen by Mu-Chiu, who was not far behind. Staring at the beautiful figure lying on the ground in front of him. To be precise, it was the dark green jade pendant on Fanyan's chest, and Mu-Chiu narrowed his eyes slightly. The jade pendant does contain a power that makes him palpitate. Even the advanced Wuling box is very afraid of it. Long before, he was very interested in the secrets hidden in the jade pendant. And now, the choice before Mu-Chiu is already very clear. Grab it? Or not grab it? Mu-Chiu naturally doesn't care about the hypocritical reason of taking advantage of others' misfortune, but the feeling the jade pendant brings to him is too weird. The power that can make the Wuling box fear, the white spirit bird that resides in it, and the resonance with the stone statue space. Mu-Chiu once tried to find out the origin of the Sanskrit sound by searching the soul, but was blocked by the jade pendant's master protection function. It seems that this jade pendant is also related to this destroyed world, www. Mu-Chiu pondered for a moment and had made a decision in his heart. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 342. Powerless. His whole body was extremely sore, and his limbs felt like a lightning strike of pain. The overload of the body has made Fanyan unable to move, and she staggered and fell on the bright passage. After going through a series of brutal battles that were unbearable to look back on, he finally relied on the power of the jade pendant. The Sanskrit sound finally broke through the confusion in the darkness and came to this passage leading to the outside world. However, now she can no longer exert any strength, and even slow movement will cause serious collapse of her body. His chest rose and fell slightly, but his vision gradually became blurred. Fanyan squinted his eyes, his face was pale, and his slender jade hands stretched out in the direction of the light door. Still, it's not working anymore. Feeling the rapid loss of physical strength, Fanyan gradually fell into despair. She experienced many disasters, but she could not escape the torture of fate. The jade pendant on the chest suddenly flashed a dark green fluorescence, as if something was about to burst out. However, the next second, when Fanyan was in despair, he suddenly felt his body rising into the air. This is... Fanyan struggled to open his eyes, and suddenly a handsome face appeared in front of him. Mu-Chiu. The voice of Sanskrit was very soft, and the dry lips tried their best to even open the mouth. "Why are you sleeping here, Miss Jianji? Be careful of catching a cold." Mu picked up Fanyan by her waist, narrowed her eyes slightly, and said with a smile. His eyes vaguely glanced at the jade pendant on his chest. Just when Mu appeared and picked up Fanyan, the flickering light on the jade pendant also dimmed in an instant. Seeing all this, Mu still had a spring breeze-like smile on her face. Fanyan, who was in Mu's arms, suddenly felt a warm current rising from her heart, and her whole body seemed to be moistened by sweet rain. Turning his head slightly, he discovered that Mu's right hand was placed on his chest, and a soft halo blended into his body. Their eyes met. Mu smiled and said, "Don't forget, I am a priest." A blush on his face disappeared in an instant, and Fanyan changed the subject and said, "Have you also passed the test of the stone statue?" Mu nodded thoughtfully. "That's right." He could finally see that the test of the stone statue was more like an obsession for the entrant. Mu has been thinking about the reasons for the collapse of this world called All Souls Continent. So the stone statue evolved into a scene before the world collapsed. But obviously the stone statue did not expect that Mu would swallow the entire illusion so violently. So much so that even the seeds of the world that support this secret realm have been deprived of it. Looking at the Sanskrit in her arms, Mu knew that she must have received a gift from this world. But Mu didn't care about this, because he had already obtained the most precious treasure in this secret realm, the world seed. Fanyan, who was also staring at Mu's face and had recovered a little from his injuries, said doubtfully, "You seem to be a little different from before." What appeared in front of Fanyan at this time was Mu's true body. Naturally, it is a little different from the split souls in previous games. The most intuitive manifestation is that the cardigan black robe he was originally wearing has disappeared. It was replaced by a slim-fitting white shirt, which was very different from the one in the game. Hearing this, Mu tapped the woman's forehead and smiled. Compared to this, it's better to leave this place of right and wrong as soon as possible. After saying that, he picked up Fanyan around the waist like a princess and slowly walked towards the light door at the end of the passage. Strangely enough, he was looking at the bright door that was far away. Mu came holding Fanyan in her arms, but she seemed to shrink to the ground. In less than a moment, she reached the door. Feeling the weak space energy coming from the portal, silver-white ripples swim in the light door. Mu knew that there was no vitality contained in the world seed as a foundation. This world may completely collapse and be lost in the long river of time and space. Without any hesitation, Mu stepped directly into the door of space. His eyes were instantly occupied by a dazzling light curtain, and a howling wind blew past his ears. The sun is scorching in the sky, and dazzling sunlight is shining overhead. The figure of Mu holding Fanyan appeared at the entrance of a mysterious cave. "Are we out?" Fanyan raised her jade hands to cover the hot sunlight coming from above her head. Until this moment, they finally escaped from that dark secret space. "Yes, we are back in the virtual game world." After all, they are still trapped in another virtual space. Mu suddenly raised his head and looked around, smiling and saying, "It seems that there are many people welcoming us back." Fanyan suddenly turned his head when he heard this. Unexpectedly, they found that they were in an unknown wilderness plain. The entrance of the cave they came out of was blocked by an unknown purple light curtain from the outside world. And just around the light curtain, there are figures of players lurking around the plains and wilderness. These players stared at the direction of the cave entrance with eager eyes, and sent messages the moment Mu and the others appeared. The frozen atmosphere spread along the air, and Mu and Fanyan became the focus of the whole scene. However, at this moment, a light curtain suddenly popped up in front of Mu, with red dots flashing on it. Mu lightly tapped the light curtain, and the figure of the fat man suddenly appeared on it. The fat man said anxiously. Hey uncle, where have you been all this time? Run, run, everyone is watching you. Miu said calmly, what's going on? During the time you disappeared, there were constant rumors that the apocalypse key was in your hands. Not long ago, someone even released news that you would leave the God Realm world from the coordinates shown in this cave. So these large guilds sent their men to waiting for you to take the bait. Miu turned his head and looked at Fan Yin in his arms, and teased. It seems that after these few days, your and my names are useless to these people. But who knew that just as Miu finished speaking, the fat man in the light curtain panicked and said something even more shocking. What a few days, uncle, it has been a full half a year since you disappeared on the 83rd floor. Warm TI. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 343. Have we been away for half a year? Miu looked thoughtful, and Fan Yin, who was in his arms, also frowned. Although it was dark in the alien world called Wanling Continent, it was impossible to tell the exact time. But it was impossible for the two of them to stay there for half a year. Relying on perception alone, the two of them had only experienced more than 10 days in the secret realm at most. According to the mysterious Man Yan who trapped everyone in the virtual world. In this virtual world called God's domain, the flow rate of time is 10 times that of the real world. All players need to find the apocalypse key that opens the channel connecting the virtual and real world within 1 year in the game world before they can return to the real world. In this way, the secret realm we are in is the same as the real world in terms of the flow rate of time and space. This can also explain why he and Fan Yin only experienced a short period of more than 10 days, but half a year has passed in the God's domain world. And there is news that reveals our whereabouts. Miu looked around and watched their eyes closely. These people were hiding on the hillside, in the grass. Some were even leaning against the purple barrier that covered the cave. Holding all kinds of strange weapons, they were eager to rush in. Miu had guessed that since he and Fan Yin entered the secret space as a trap set by the Fenglan Knights. Then the coordinates they came out of at this moment must have been revealed by the Fenglan Knights. The purpose was to use these players who were eager to return to the real world to get rid of them. In this way, whether they escaped today or not, the rumor that they held the apocalypse key would spread throughout the continent. Regardless of whether the news was true or not, there would be countless anxious players who would come to trouble themselves. This move was really sinister. Feeling the constant peeping of the eyes around, it seemed that they had already determined that they and Fan Yin were the holders of the apocalypse key. Just looking at it openly, there were many players with bad intentions, and there were many hidden eyes in secret. Miu looked at the background of the fat man in the light curtain and found that he was also standing in a wilderness similar to the surrounding scene. It seems that the fat man is also hiding in the dark and observing the situation. Where are we now? Miu looked at the fat man and asked. Half a year has passed, and the guild players of the whole server have broken through the dangers and overcome more than a dozen levels. Boss, you are now at the entrance of a secret realm called Badging Cave on the 97th floor. The secret realm here is naturally not comparable to the world that Miu and the others were in before. The purple light curtain outside is a protective barrier. All the players are watching covetously, but no one can break this barrier. As time goes by, the brightness on the light curtain is gradually dimming. I believe that when the light curtain is broken, the players who are no longer hindered will rush towards them like hungry tigers. 97th floor. Miu thought for a moment, and broke through more than a dozen levels in half a year. He underestimated the young talents cultivated by the major human bases in the real world. Except for the civilians in the Zilan base, all the players in the server are seed-level players sent by major forces to enter the game to train their minds and combat experience. These people are extremely rare and powerful in the real world. If nothing unexpected happens, they will all become the proud sons of heaven who dominate the end of the world in the future. Fan Yin in his arms also noticed something unusual, subconsciously tightened the mithril sword in his hand, and slowly said, "Chiu Mu, put me down." Regardless of her weak body, she actually wanted to join the battle in front of her, which was already serious before it even started. Being strong yourself will not help the battle, Miss Jianji. Mu Chiu's tone was still calm, and in such a tense atmosphere, there was not even a slight fluctuation in his emotions. Slowly putting Fan Yin down, Mu Chiu said, "You should have that sound transmission item too. The announcement item that can spread the news to the whole server is very precious." Zhang Wanzhen of Fool Guild once sent information about the Apocalypse Key to all the players in the server through the sound transmission item. As an important member of a large guild and a top expert on the God Realm ranking, Fan Yin naturally has such an item. Although Fan Yin didn't understand why, he still opened the storage space carried by the system. He handed a badge carved out of jade to Mu Chiu. Mu Chiu held the jade in his hand, and a mysterious smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The anxious voice of the fat man kept coming from the light screen in front of him. "Boss, why don't you delay for a while? I'll go and gather some brothers to help you. Don't look at their large number, I'll kill them." Before he finished speaking, Mu Chiu, who looked indifferent, hung up the communication directly. As the light screen reflecting the fat man's figure closed, it seemed to correspond to it. The purple barrier covering the entire hegemony cave also became dim and flickering, and was about to be completely broken. This also meant that the last barrier protecting Mu Chiu and the others would disappear. Seeing this, the spies of the major guilds in the outside world immediately reported it to their own guilds. More and more players rushed from unknown places to the outside of this hegemony cave that had never been discovered, staring fiercely at the two people under the barrier. In just a short moment, countless players who heard the news had gathered on the wilderness plain. With eager and greedy faces, they surrounded Mu Chiu and Fan Yin tightly. But no one spoke, but thousands of eyes were focused on the two people, and the atmosphere of the whole venue became depressed and solidified in an instant. Finally, as the purple light curtain completely dimmed, Mu Chiu smiled and moved forward slightly. A faint purple light flashed in front of his chest, and a blood-red light turned into a scarlet demon sword in Mu Chiu's hand. A black Taoist robe suddenly emerged and was draped over Mu Chiu. The weak Fan Yin lay down behind Mu Chiu, watching the black-robed figure in front of him walk forward. Suddenly, a clear voice sounded in Fan Yin's ears. "Now, I'll let you see how to cut off that ridiculous fate." After speaking, Mu Chiu stood in the light curtain, and a black-robed figure appeared in the center of countless people's sight. The black robe fluttered, and a smile appeared on Mu Chiu's face. "I didn't expect so many people to welcome us when we came out of the customs. I guess you don't want to waste time, so I'll make it short." A cold light flashed in Mu Chiu's eyes, and he suddenly crushed the jade in his hand, and the blood blade of the magic sword was deeply inserted under his feet. An unparalleled domineering aura swept in all directions. "Those who enter the hegemony realm die." The arrogant and domineering voice instantly resounded across the entire plane. Then, at this moment, all the players in the server appeared in front of such a shocking sentence. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 344. Since the disaster called Divine Realm disaster came, players from all over the world have been trapped in the virtual game world. More than half a year has passed, and these players have gradually blurred the gap between awakened people and ordinary survivors. Most of the players who can still survive in this world are determined and cruel. When the news that Mu Chiu and Fan Yin came out of the secret realm spread throughout the Divine Realm continent, the players of the whole server were boiling. Regardless of whether the news that Muqiu and Fanyin were holding the Apocalypse Key was true or not, it forced the impatient players to rush into the coordinates where the news came from. And then, a message light screen appeared in front of all the players in the whole server. Those who enter the hegemony realm die. Words full of hostility and hegemony appeared in front of everyone. The user's name is marked below, as if it is an untouchable taboo-lonely night. Countless players were instantly shocked by this wild and domineering words and stopped. But most players still chose to take the risk, ignoring the warnings on the light screen, and rushed into the secret forbidden land on the 97th floor. In a short moment, thousands of players climbed up to the plane of the hegemony cave. Tens of thousands of players stood in the green plane, staring at the black-robed figure standing in the distance. Players of different professions and races came to witness this ultimate battle. The black mass of heads was like a wave, and all they could see were tall tribes of different bodies. These players looked at the black-robed figure with greed or fear in their eyes. He was once one of the taboos on the God Realm list. He single-handedly defeated the ultimate boss and shocked many old guilds with his strong strength, Guyechiu Mu. Players in countless guilds looked at each other. Most of them were in a wait-and-see state, hesitating whether to join this destined extraordinary battle. Tens of thousands of players gathered together, targeting only two people. At this moment, standing at the forefront of the crowd was a powerful guild on the guild rankings. Guild rankings number 3 Cloud City. Guild rankings number 4 Boulder Breaking the Sky. Guild rankings number 5 Dawn Guild. Guild rankings number 6 Flower Guild. Guild rankings number 7 Mad Beast Guild. Guild rankings. All the powerful forces that could be named and admired by all the players on the server appeared on the wilderness plain. Look, that's Xiao Yuntian, the president of Cloud City. Could it be that he is here to protect Sword Princess Fanyin? Are you stupid? With so many guild bosses gathered together, he can no longer shake them alone. Standing on the hillside is the Kylan Beast King of Dawn Guild. He is really impressive. There are also Zhang Duquang of Crazy Beast Guild, Lin Xiaoxian of 10,000 Flowers Guild, Shi Pokong of Giant Stone Breaking the Sky. These are all the top 10 bosses on the God Realm list. The legendary bosses on the God Realm list also appeared with exclamations. This battle, which has not yet started, has almost gathered the elite players of the entire server. There are also many unidentified players hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to move. Even the most reclusive masters will not be able to help but rush to find out when they hear the news that the Apocalypse Key has appeared. On a hillside outside the wilderness, Mao Yuming, who had 2 horns on his head and a face like a lion and a tiger, was wearing a special armor. He was still a teenager, and he looked anxiously at the figure surrounded by the crowd below. "Uncle, Brother Chiu is in such a critical situation, what should we do now?" His seemingly fierce eyes revealed a nervous look, and few people saw the Kylan Beast King show such an attitude. Next to Mao Yuming, Luo Ziyuan, who was carrying a heavy sword on his shoulder, frowned. "Yuming, don't be impulsive." Behind them, there were many companions of the resistance army, who all rushed here at the first time. It has been half a year since they came to this world, but the resistance army still has no clues about the Key of Apocalypse. The Dawn Guild formed by them has become a powerful guild that dominates the divine domain. Staring at the dark crowd below, Luo Ziyuan was at a loss for a moment. He knew that this was probably a trick of the enemy, who wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of Muqiu and lead out the rebels. They had a close personal relationship with Muqiu, who had saved their lives many times. But the rebels still had a difficult mission, and Luo Ziyuan couldn't gamble the hope of the entire rebels and even the Zilan people on this. Besides, there were too many players below, and it was useless for their guild to protect Muqiu alone. "Wait a minute." Luo Ziyuan sighed, comforted everyone and planned to wait for the opportunity before making plans. At the same time, at another location on the plain, a majestic team wearing uniform armor stood quietly. The hurricane roared, but it added a bit of majesty to the team. There was a large area of land around, but in this crowded battlefield with a large number of people, no guild dared to stand shoulder to shoulder with it. This is the powerful guild ranked third in the entire server, Cloud City. Brother Xiao, go and rescue Sister Fanyan. In the front row of the team, Jing Jing, a cute girl with twin ponytails, urged Xiao Yuntian, who was riding a white horse and holding a spear. Xiao Yuntian looked silently in the direction of Muqiu and Fanyan, turning a deaf ear to the girl's call. After a brief thought, Xiao Yuntian suddenly said to the girl, "Contact Fanyan to confirm whether the apocalypse key is in her hands." The decisive voice was rational and indifferent, but it was tantamount to treating Fanyan as a commodity when it reached the girl's ears. The girl looked at the handsome silver-armored man in front of her with a strange look. Xiao Yuntian's expression remained the same, and his eyes were fixed on the beautiful figure of Fanyan in the distance. Forgive me, this is the most basic principle in the end times. The atmosphere in the wilderness was getting heavier and the depressing atmosphere was almost suffocating. In a deep castle that was rarely visited by people somewhere. A light curtain floated in front of the long-haired man wearing a leather coat and a gloomy face on the throne. The image on the light screen is exactly what is happening in the Hegemony Cave at this moment. Looking at the amazing scene of the huge crowds of players in the screen, Long Haoyang's mouth curled up a sneer. Eternal Night Dynasty. Even the most powerful forces will be subdued when they arrive at the Divine Realm continent. Evil Python. A hoarse voice behind him said. Subordinates are here. You go to the scene to keep an eye on the situation. If necessary, you can do it yourself and take off the man's head. Long Haoyang said so, and the hoarse voice behind him immediately accepted the order. As the hoarse voice left, Long Haoyang once again fixed his eyes on the arrogant black-robed figure. Somehow, his mind recalled the conversation between the two that day. Long Haoyang smiled evilly. Deal with you? I don't even need to do it myself. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 345. God's Domain Continent, 97th floor, Hegemony Cave. As time went by, countless players flooded into this dangerous forbidden land for humans. Once, Hegemony Cave was a secret adventure land, attracting countless players to explore. But there is no doubt that none of the players who entered it could come out alive. As time went by, no player dared to venture into it in person, and Hegemony Cave became a forbidden land for living beings. And now, as the news of the apocalypse key spread, countless impatient players rushed in. On the wilderness plain, there was only a figure in a black robe standing in front of a cave under the hillside. Behind him, a beautiful young woman collapsed. Countless greedy figures stared at the two figures in front of the cave, ready to move. It seemed as if they were going to rush forward to fight for the precious treasure they had dreamed of in the next second. However, even under the gaze of so many people, the black-robed figure was still fearless, and an indescribable terrifying momentum swept in all directions. There were tens of thousands of players present, but no one dared to take the lead. Damn, why are you afraid of him? After so many days, he is no longer the arrogant Guya on the God Realm ranking. A sharp voice spread throughout the crowd, which also shocked everyone's heart. It was really that Muqiu brought too much pressure to everyone. Standing there alone, he suppressed the momentum of tens of thousands of people. But these players recalled at this moment that it had been a full 6 months since Muqiu and the others entered the secret realm. During this period, countless people broke through the levels through thorns and thorns. Weapons and equipment were updated, opportunities and magic weapons emerged in an endless stream, and even their levels were generally above level 90. On the other hand, Muqiu and his partner were dressed the same as before they entered the secret realm, and even their level remained at level 83. Many smart people were already thinking about how to get the whereabouts of the apocalypse key. At this time, a loud voice in the team said. Chiu Mu, the brothers are only trying to find a way out, and have no intention of being your enemy. Tell us the whereabouts of the Apocalypse Key, and we guarantee that you too will be safe. Pairs of eyes stared at Mu Chiu's figure, as if they had already determined that the Apocalypse Key was in his hands. Facing tens of thousands of scrutinizing eyes, Mu Chiu suddenly laughed loudly. I dare not determine where the Apocalypse Key is, but if you take another step forward, I guarantee that you will not be safe. The slightly sarcastic laughter echoed throughout the wilderness, mocking the incompetence and cowardice of many players. Finally, someone couldn't hold back his eagerness, and his burly and majestic body turned into a gust of wind, rushing towards Mu Chiu. This man was covered in brown-yellow hair, with a tiger head and a human body, and a fierce face. The moment he moved, a group of orcs followed him. It's Zhang Tuquang from the Crazy Beast Guild. He is a ruthless man who doesn't care about his life. Many players immediately recognized this big man who led the charge and exclaimed. As Zhang Tuquang led hundreds of orcs in the guild to charge, more and more eager players followed and rushed towards Mu Chiu. Chiu Mu, you killed my guild brothers, and I will settle this account with you today. Zhang Tuquang's momentum was terrifying. Although he was a fighting madman, he was not a fool. In this world, there are deadly dangers all the time. If you are not careful, your soul will be lost in this virtual abyss space. And it is normal for dead people to be in the end of the world outside or in the world of God's domain where souls live. Zhang Tuquang used the banner of revenge for his companions to cover up his behavior of robbery, which was indeed sinister. Thousands of tall figures rushed across the plain, the earth trembled and made a sound, and they shouted the banner of justice. Mu Chiu stretched out his hand holding the handle of the knife, felt the excitement trembling from the blade, and whispered. Do you want to have a good meal again? With his back to Fanyan's figure, his mouth opened a strange arc. It's just right, I'll stretch my muscles too. During this period, the soul has been traveling around the world, and the old bones of the main body are almost rusted if they don't move. The joints made a sound like popping beans, and Mu Chiu turned his head and said to Fanyan with the magic knife in his hand. Isn't the so-called destiny meant to be broken? Before he finished speaking, a gleam of light flashed in Mu Chiu's eyes, and his figure flashed and rushed directly into the endless sea of people. The next moment, Mu Chiu's figure rushed into the crowd like a meteor in an instant. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. No one expected that someone would dare to rush forward in the face of this certain death. In an instant, like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, a big hole was instantly pierced through the team of players. Blood flew, and countless players' bodies were thrown into the air under the huge momentum, with horrified looks on their faces. With a loud bang, Mu Chiu's body shook and broke through the alliance of the players, and the ground under his feet collapsed inch by inch in the extremely fast momentum. Swords flashed, guns chopped, axes chopped, and all kinds of strange weapons greeted Mu Chiu. Facing the oncoming sharp light, Mu Chiu was not surprised but happy, and immediately swung the blade in his hand. As a clear and incomparable sound of breaking through the air reverberated in the air, the shining blades that were swung at Mu Chiu were actually shattered by the demon sword. Not only that, the blood-colored blade light passed through the air in a semi-arc shape, and just hit the orcs rushing over not far away. These powerful orcs, known for their sturdy bodies, were actually split into two in an instant. What's even more incredible is that the blood bars above the heads of these players were instantly cleared, indicating that their lives have come to an end. But the bodies that were cut apart did not explode into pieces of blood-colored prisms in the first place. Instead, they wailed and fell to the ground, watching the vitality in their bodies continue to drain away, but they were powerless. Blood continued to flow out of their broken bodies, turning into bundles of blood-colored silk flying in the air. The bloodlines fluttered all over the sky, and finally all merged into the demonic longsword in Mu Chiu's hand. As the blood continued to flow in, the blood on the strange longsword, which was already flowing with strange blood, became more and more red. In a short moment, hundreds of broken bodies were lying at Muchu's feet. The blood was strangely floating in the air, as if it had become the prologue of the end of the world. Against the backdrop of blood, the figure wearing a black robe, a white shirt, and holding a blood blade was so conspicuous in the crowd. As if a death god walked out of the abyss of hell. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 346. What kind of monster is he? Everyone be careful, that knife is weird. Muchu's fierce attack immediately stunned the players who launched the attack. They didn't expect that after such a long time, Muchu's strength was still so strong. Some players shouted in disbelief. Come together, I don't believe that so many people can't crush him. No matter how strong he is, can he be as strong as the boss? These players who launched the first round of fierce attacks have been trapped in the virtual world for so long. They have been anxious and impatient for a long time. How can they give up easily when facing a strong enemy? So, under the leadership of those who are interested, countless players join the battlefield after a brief hesitation. In an instant, the morale of the player alliance that was attacking Muchu was greatly boosted. What kind of scene would it be if tens of thousands of players of different professions launched an attack together? At the forefront of the battlefield, there were orc warriors wearing armor and carrying huge axes and hammers on their shoulders, charging to open the way, with a terrifying momentum. Behind them, there were mages chanting magic, and the brilliant light seemed to cover the sky. Gunners and archers fired cannonballs and crossbows at the back of the team, but thousands of orbital centers were only aiming at a human figure. There were also special groups in the air similar to elves and birds and beasts ready to launch assassinations at any time. The huge momentum ran through the entire wilderness plain, as if the one standing in front of them was not a human player, but a fierce boss guarding the level. Big brother, are we not going to fight yet? A guild stood quietly on the plain, and one of them watched this earth-shaking battle, and spoke to the burly man beside him with some excitement. Their guild is in the top 10 of the guild list. If they join the battlefield at this moment, they will definitely have a good chance of winning the apocalypse key. But the burly man frowned. Something is wrong, that Chiumu is definitely not that simple. The scene of Muchu fighting the boss alone in the water cave that day is still fresh in my memory. Although he had only met Muchu a few times, the burly man was so meticulous that he had already determined in his heart that Muchu was unfathomable. This burly man was Shipokong, the president of Giant Stone Breaking the Sky. It is said that this man is not only a big player on the God Realm ranking, but also a child of destiny cultivated by a human base in reality. In the repeated life and death trials, Shipokong developed an instinctive alertness to danger. So even if tens of thousands of players were fighting for the scene, Shipokong remained motionless and waited for the development of the incident. Under the attention of the public, the battle between tens of thousands of people on the plain against a player became more and more intense. Under the sword and shadow, the black-robed figure was seen crisscrossing and shaking. Not only did he not release any gorgeous skills, but he used his body to resist waves of fierce attacks. The armored warrior chopped with a giant sword in his hand, and Muchu swung the demon sword blood blade in his backhand. In an instant, the giant sword shattered, and the body of the warrior wearing fine armor was also split in two in an instant. At this moment, several tall orcs rushed to the side. Muchu's eyes flashed with brilliance, and he did not retreat but advanced. He clenched his fist with one hand and the chi force surged. With one punch, the orc suddenly exploded into a ball of blood mist. A gust of wind whistled past his ears, and Muchu's figure flashed and was already 1,000 meters away. Accompanied by a violent bang, the ground where Muqiu was originally standing had been bombarded by artillery fire to form a deep pit that collapsed for dozens of meters. The black robe was inspired, and players of different shapes and sizes kept launching strange skills to attack Muqiu. But the latter always had a playful smile on his face, and then he broke the enemy's offensive lightly. The magic knife in his hand fell, and the blood light cut through the sky, taking away dozens of lives every time. So far, no player has been his opponent. Break all laws with one force. Throughout the whole process, Muqiu only fought with his body, but did not use any skills. The more he fought with these players, the stronger his fighting spirit became. Not enough, not enough. Muqiu laughed wildly in the battlefield full of killing. Entering the soul space with the body will be subject to many constraints. If you use a large range of abilities, you will immediately be rejected by this world. However, Muqiu does not intend to use destructive abilities. The box of the ghost and the demon sword Yama must devour enough blood souls to advance. Muqiu intends to use the soul energy of these players to feed the demon sword. Feeling the scorching temperature coming from the demon sword, Muqiu's fighting spirit is also rising. These weak players who appear in the form of souls are not his opponents at all. It's fake, tens of thousands of people can't do anything to him. What happened during the time they disappeared that made him so powerful? Countless players stared at the figure who was rampant on the plain with their eyes wide open, their expressions horrified. No matter how powerful the character was, he couldn't last more than one round. They were all players, but Muqiu seemed to have turned on a cheat. His seemingly mortal body contained infinite power. At this moment, the sun hanging high in the sky was covered by a brilliant light, and a light ball shining like a comet rolled over Muqiu's head. This is a magic attack of thousands of mages. The colorful comet light was about to hit him, and Muqiu's mouth curved up, and he stood still with the demon sword across his chest. A blood-colored flame surrounded the demon sword. In an instant, the blood flame demon sword and the comet light collided with each other, and a strange scene happened. The moment the beam of light, as gorgeous as a comet, hit the blade, the spell energy contained in it was swallowed up by the blood flame. The demon sword Yama, soul-devouring and bloodthirsty, is its best food. In essence, including this soul illusion. Weapons, players, skills, everything in it is within its scope of annexation. The flames and the gorgeous light intertwined together, and the boundless power turned into residual waves and filled everyone's heart. Not far behind Muqiu, Fan Yin, who was limp on the ground, stared at everything happening in front of him. The back of the black-robed man was reflected in Fan Yin's eyes, and the words that floated in her ears were still fresh in her memory. Now, I'll let you see how to cut off that ridiculous fate. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 347. In a sea of fire, a figure slowly walked out of the burning flames. Wearing a black robe, the edge of the robe was flashing with dark red cloud patterns, holding a strange long sword surrounded by flames. Countless unbelieving players holding various weapons rushed towards the black-robed figure with murderous intent. However, before these players could get within 6 feet of him, they were burned into slag by the blood-red boiling fire. Be careful, that flame is weird. What kind of skill is that? It's so fierce. The many players watching stared at the flames around Muqiu, thinking that it was a skill treasure from the secret realm. 70,000 people together, is there no one who can stop him? At this moment, several brightly dressed figures appeared out of nowhere, and the swords, spears, and halberds in their hands flashed with strange light. The powerful aura that was either sacred or fierce instantly spread to the whole scene, and it also made everyone look horrified. A handsome man rose up surrounded by a bunch of petals. It's Lin Xiaoxian, the president of the Wanhua Guild. A man with wings on his back and a longbow in his hand stood in the air. And Linju from the Juki Guild. Two men and women in white silk robes held a long sword in each hand, floating like fairies, with outstanding temperament. Lin Yu and Zhang Yun from the winged pair, this pair of immortal heroes who are famous in the god realm, are here too. A series of figures with extraordinary momentum stood in front of the crowd, which shocked many players. These are all famous players on the god realm list. After some trials, these real masters finally couldn't hold back and prepared to launch a joint attack on Mu Qiu. Zhang Tuquang, who was originally watching the changes from a distance, also turned into a tiger at this time and bit towards Mu Qiu. These powerful behind-the-scenes people who coveted the Apocalypse Key finally planned to launch a joint attack. At the same time, tens of thousands of players gathered their forces and gathered towards Mu Qiu like a surging wave. At this moment, Mu Qiu was a powerful boss in front of many players. Defeating him and taking the Apocalypse Key would open the way back to reality. However, just as tens of thousands of players rushed towards Mu Qiu's back, a wild hurricane tornado rushed in from a distance. Countless players were swept away by this fierce wind. The fierce hurricane rushed through the crowd like a beast, and the majestic momentum was difficult to resist even for the strong orcs. In a few breaths, Mu Qiu's back was directly opened by the hurricane waves. The wind and waves gradually dissipated, and a slender figure appeared beside Mu Qiu. Fengling's sword princess, Fanyan. At this moment, Fanyan was holding a mithril longsword, with a pair of elf-like thin wings spread out behind her, bright eyes and white teeth, like a fairy in the moon. Fanyan stood behind Mu Qiu, back to back, surrounded by countless greedy player alliances. "I'm not as fragile as you say." Fanyan looked back and smiled, the jade pendant on her chest exuded a magnificent light. Her beautiful face showed an indelible paleness, but her expression was particularly firm. The beauty behind her was like a painting, and the dust that had been contaminated in the foreign world for many days did not seem to affect her exquisite face. Mu Qiu's mouth curled up slightly. "Don't die, Miss Jianji." As soon as the voice fell, the top players from all forces in front of him launched a fierce attack. Lin Xiuxian of Wanhua Guild was surrounded by ripples, and gorgeous petals surrounded him. Large petals condensed into a sea of flowers in front of him, swirling and rotating. He saw his slender fingers lightly tapped, and the spreading petals instantly turned into flying knives flashing with cold light, rushing towards Mu Qiu at lightning speed. At the same time, the gloomy man with wings on his back plucked the bowstring, and suddenly a group of inky crows flew around him. The shadows of the crows condensed in the sky, and all merged into the longbow in the hands of the gloomy man named Linju. With a loud swoosh, a dark arrow pierced the sky. The light of the magic arrow even overwhelmed the dazzling sun. Rather than saying it was a giant arrow fired from a crossbow, it was better to say it was a huge light column filled with dark light. The vast aftermath of the spell directly repelled the players on both sides, and this attack alone was enough to penetrate a cliff. The sea of flowers in front of him was like a flying knife, and there was a dark light column piercing the sky above his head. Facing an attack that was enough to kill most of the players in the server in seconds, Mu Qiu stood there calmly. A fierce roar suddenly sounded beside his ears, and Zhang Tuquang, who had been waiting for an opportunity, had already pounced on Mu Qiu's side without knowing when. With cold claws and bared fangs, Zhang Tuquang, a tiger-headed man, was only a few feet away from Mu Qiu. The claws and fangs fell, as if Mu Qiu's thin figure would be thrown to the ground in the next second. Roar! At this moment, an even more ferocious and heart-shaking tiger roar resounded throughout the venue. On the black Taoist robe that Mu Qiu was wearing, cloud patterns surged, and dark red patterns stood out. A dark black cat flew over amid the surging black air. Immediately afterwards, groups of black mist continued to emerge around him. The originally short black cat was instantly transformed into a monstrous tiger under the cover of the black mist. The giant tiger's whole body is wrapped in black flames. It is domineering and majestic, with extraordinary momentum, like a peerless ferocious beast that came out of the netherworld. What a terrifying beast, just standing there sent shivers down my spine. What kind of monster is that? Its aura cannot even be compared to the sky-breaking demon tiger on the 92nd floor. The people watching were talking a lot, even some of the famous people on the list were trembling and horrified when they felt the terrifying power emanating from the netherworld evil tiger. Sure enough, this Chu Mu's trump card must be more than that. In the darkness, Shi Po Kong, who had been standing still, saw the giant tiger appear and immediately became convinced that Mu Chu was invincible. Just under a small hill not far from the plain, a fat man with a bloated figure was holding a pair of telescope-like props with an excited expression. Dear me, why was this man invited out? He naturally recognized that the majestic giant tiger in front of him was the peerless beast that crushed everyone in the Battle of Redemption, the Mangshan Dome tiger. Zhang Tuquang, you boy, please wish yourself well. The fat man knew in his heart that this tiger lord was a real destructive beast during his lifetime. Sure enough, the moment the netherworld evil tiger surged out, Zhang Tuquang, who heard the roar of the tiger, immediately felt a wave of heart palpitations. Before he could react, the ferocious giant tiger, whose entire body was made of black flames, had opened its fangs and charged at him. Ignoring the miserable screams coming from beside her, Mu Chu turned around and looked at the two attacks in front of her. There is a murderous intention hidden in the sea of flowers all over the sky. The gorgeous petals turned into flying knives. As if it had a target, it stabbed at Mu Chu's vital points. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 348. Child's Trick. Mu Chu slowly stretched out his left arm and put his two fingers together. Accompanied by a loud bang, the ground under his feet suddenly cracked. A hot wall of fire suddenly appeared in front of Mu Chu. The ferocious flames surged, and black figures rose in the sea of fire, as if to drive the scorching fire to pull all living things into endless karma. And the flower sea that turned into flying knife blades was burned into black embers by the hot karma fire the moment it touched the sea of fire. How is it possible? Lin Xiaoxian's pupils opened, and his expression was out of control. These gorgeous petals were forged by him after collecting countless cold snow crystals and falling into the furnace. Water and fire are not invaded, nothing can break it, and ordinary flames can't damage it at all. But now thousands of flying knife petals can't even survive a breath in the sea of fire, and they turned into a pool of embers. Even the orcs and warriors who rushed towards Mu Chu were instantly turned into ashes under the attack of the sea of fire. Huh! Mu Chu looked up and saw a dark light piercing the sky in the distance, shooting towards Mu Chu's head. This long arrow composed of dark crows in the sky seemed to have life. Before it got close to the sea of fire, it suddenly bent and turned its direction to hit Mu Chu's head directly. Mu Chu tilted his head slightly, and the dark arrow with a sharp edge just passed by him and shot into the land behind him. The dark light scattered, and a huge gully was blasted into the large plain behind him, and the human and beast on the path were annihilated in an instant. The decayed breath turned into smoke and filled the whole field. The blood bars on the heads of all players who came into contact with the dark breath dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it turned directly into a pool of pus, and there was no body left. However, the next second, the scattered dark light condensed again. With a shrill cry, a huge crow emerged and attacked Mu Chu from behind. Be careful! Mu Chu did not move, and a crisp female voice came from behind. Fan Yin shouted, and her body leaped up in the wind, waving her long sword to sweep away a large area of wind and clouds, instantly dispersing the huge body of the crow. At this moment, two white figures, a man and a woman, floated in the sky. Both of them were wearing silk robes. The man was handsome, while the woman was beautiful and fairy-like. The two men, talented and beautiful, with outstanding temperament, were the famous immortal couple on the God Realm list. And, we can return to the real world after getting the key of Apocalypse. The man looked at the beauty beside him tenderly, with affection. Yunur. The beautiful woman smiled, like a blooming flower. Maybe we can return to reality this time, I want to marry you. The man made a solemn promise, and then the two of them clasped their fingers tightly together and swung their swords together. It appears. The combined skill of the immortal couple, the sword of love. Some players exclaimed, this is the trump card skill that the two of them have firmly sat on the God realm ranking, the fusion skill of the two bodies. The two of them stood in the air, and suddenly a dazzling halo emanated from behind them, and the mandarin duck swords in their hands burst into brilliant light. The next moment, a white giant sword gradually condensed in front of the two people with fairy spirits, and from a distance it seemed to pierce the sun. As the two swung the sword together, the giant broadsword also fell down at the first time, with an unparalleled momentum. In today's God realm world, no player dared to face it head-on. Mewtwo smiled, without any intention of dodging. Raising the blood blade of the demon sword in his hand, the blade flashed with a scarlet demon light. The next moment, the blood-colored blade suddenly stretched several times, and the suppressed blood soul floated out from the blade, like a ghost of a dead soul who died unjustly. In an instant, the scarlet demon sword collided with the giant lightsaber. The huge pressure directly pressed the surrounding land to collapse piece by piece, the wind and clouds surged, and the players disappeared in an instant, leaving no bones. The huge sword light had not yet completely condensed, and it was eroded by the demon sword in Mewtwo's hand. The dazzling white light was instantly swallowed by the strange blood light. With a whoosh, the dazzling white giant sword shattered and dissipated. And the immortal couple in the sky in the distance looked pale, spitting blood in the air, and fell into the sky. Mewtwo held the blood sword in his right hand, and the blood on it was winding like blood veins. At the moment when the huge lightsaber was broken, the ground behind Mewtwo suddenly cracked. A cold poisoned dagger was pressed against Mewtwo's neck, and a long snake behind him gradually turned into a human form. As expected of you, Guyet. You made me wait so long to get the chance. A cold and hoarse voice came from behind, and Mewtwo clearly felt the dagger on his neck go a few inches deeper. It's the evil python of the Dragon Rider Guild, the assassin master who got the hidden profession. That blood-killing poisonous dagger turned out to be him. Even the first guild couldn't hold back. Many players present looked at each other, seeing that Mewtwo was captured by the evil python. It seemed that the ownership of the Apocalypse Key was a foregone conclusion. But Mewtwo, who was held back by the cold dagger, had a calm expression. He slowly spoke when he heard the name of the Dragon Rider Guild. The Wind Mist Knights. The voice was calm, as if he had expected it. Evil Python was not flustered when his identity was revealed, but smiled evilly. As expected of a strong man from the Eternal Night Dynasty, even 70,000 people gathered together can't do anything to you. The two people's voices were very flat, and no one heard them tacitly. The Zilan base needs to cover up their true purpose of trapping players. Mewtwo did not disclose his identity from the Eternal Night Dynasty. Seeing that Mewtwo did not speak again, the gloomy-faced evil python said again. Although I don't know how you escaped from the secret world, the Dragon King has ordered that all creatures who have entered the secret world must die here. Except you, that woman is no exception. From the tone of the evil python, he seemed to know very little about the world of all spirits. Mewtwo once explored the soul memory of Man Xiong, who was also one of the Fenglan Knights, and everything about the continent of all spirits was also very vague. He only knew that it was a secret realm where creatures were forbidden. With Mewtwo's perception, how could he not have discovered the existence of the evil python? The goal has been achieved. Mewtwo turned and smiled. Are you so sure you can get rid of me? The evil python sneered, knowing that Mewtwo had other trump cards, and he didn't intend to waste time talking to him. He said sinisterly, Lord Dragon King asked me to bring you one last message. To get rid of you, he doesn't need to do it himself. After that, the evil python's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and the cold and poisonous dagger in his hand suddenly stabbed down. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 349. The evil python laughed sinisterly, and was about to swing the sharp dagger in his hand to behead Miu. However, the next second, his arm swinging the dagger suddenly stopped. It was as if an invisible tentacle bound him, and his stiff arm could not even fall. Then, a piercing coldness surged into his heart, and his back was even colder. The evil python with a gloomy face slightly sideways, and found that his lower limbs were frozen by a large piece of ice at some point. And this ice continued to spread to his upper body with the crystal blue mist. The evil python was shocked, and his body trembled and turned into a python about 10 feet long, breaking through the ice crystals under his feet and trying to drill into the ground. At this moment, Miu suddenly turned around and grabbed the body of the python with his backhand. No matter how the evil python struggled, it could not escape. You can run so fast, you might as well call it a burrowing worm. Miu smiled happily, clamped the python's abdomen with one hand and exerted a little force, and the swift giant python suddenly exploded, blood splattered everywhere. The snake body that was broken into two halves fell to the ground, and a section of the tail exploded into a pool of blood mist, and the snake head actually drilled into the ground the moment it landed. The earth was shaking, and half of the broken snake head suddenly jumped out from a distance of hundreds of meters away from Miu. The broken cross-section kept spurting blood, and in a few breaths, the incomplete snake body turned into a human form again. The figure of the evil python emerged again, but this time he was pale and blood was still flowing under his body. Oh! The real body entered the game. Miu immediately realized that the evil python in front of him had entered the space with his physical body like him. It's just that the person behind him gave it convenience, and the real body was not constrained by this world when it entered the game. The evil python stuck out its tongue and stared at Miu with a vigilant look. After being attacked by so many people, you still have some strength left. I underestimated you. The evil python took out a round black sphere from somewhere, which was filled with evil spirits. But the Dragon King has ordered that you must die here today. After saying that, the evil python swallowed the round black sphere in one gulp, and the whole person was suddenly wrapped in evil spirits. The large area of evil spirits was surging abnormally, and countless players around were scared away by this terrible and fierce evil spirit, fearing that they would be touched. And the body of the evil python changed again under the encirclement of the evil spirits. The body, which was originally several feet long, was rising step by step, and a large area of evil spirits enveloped the sky. A huge black shadow gradually emerged from the diffuse evil spirits. With a strange hiss, a huge dragon with two horns on its head rolled out from the black cloud. As soon as the black cloud dragon transformed by the evil python rushed out, it brought out a terrifying wave of evil spirit, with its fangs and claws bared, and its might was overwhelming. The fierce evil spirit was the first to be hit by Miu. Miu narrowed his eyes slightly. The strength of this evil python after its incarnation was rare in the S level, and it was almost comparable to Ji Yufeng at the beginning. Its body was huge, its beard was long, it was covered by black clouds, and the turbid air was surging. Looking at its body shape, it actually has some dragon charm. Looking at the huge dragon in the sky, everyone on the ground was frightened by its might, their faces were terrified, and they were trembling with fear. Miu, on the other hand, was examining the dragon that looked like a dragon above his head, and was amazed. I don't know what means the Zilan base used to mix a trace of dragon veins into you. Do you want to be a fake dragon? You are still far away. Mewtwo's voice was very light, but it was clearly heard by the evil python in the black cloud. The pupils of the giant python trembled slightly, as if his heart was revealed, his eyes were fierce, and there was a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. "You are looking for death." Without much nonsense, accompanied by the terrifying murderous aura covering the sky, the dragon transformed by the evil python roared ferociously. The huge shadow rolled over Mewtwo's head, as if it was determined to directly annihilate Mewtwo's body, leaving no bones. Mewtwo snorted, turned around and looked at Fanyan behind him, and said, "Lend me the sword." Fanyan was still staring at the dragon in the sky with a serious face. After hearing Mewtwo's words, he was stunned, but still handed the mithril longsword in his hand to Mewtwo. He held the demon sword blood blade in his left hand and the mithril longsword in his right hand. Mewtwo looked around the whole scene, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "It's almost enough fun, let me show you a fireworks show at the end." The blood light on the blade was saturated, the demon sword had absorbed enough blood soul, and there was no need for him to fight with these ants. In an instant, as his voice fell, a blazing flame suddenly ignited on the demon sword. The red flame spread rapidly, and the rising flame gradually turned into a sky-high fire dragon, with unparalleled power and looking down on everything. The fire dragon condensed by the red flame was lifelike, and the diffuse sea of fire instantly filled the entire sky. The red fire dragon was like a sun holding up the sky, illuminating the entire sky the moment it appeared. The terrifying evil spirit that originally filled the sky was instantly flattened by the scorching sea of fire. And on the mithril longsword on the right-hand side, cold frost suddenly appeared. It was as if the cold air from the underworld condensed into a crystal-clear ice dragon, hovering in the sky, and the chill it radiated was icy and piercing. The fire dragon and the ice dragon split the entire sky together, and the terrifying pressure released instantly dispelled the black evil spirit. Under the ice and fire, Mewtwo slowly waved the sword in his hand, and the ice and fire dragons roared in the air. The two dragons swooped down, carrying the unmatched supreme dragon power and the raging fire mixed with ice waves. As the blade fell, the extreme meaning of ice and fire instantly swept over the entire plain. Including the huge dragon several feet long, all the creatures participating in the siege on the wilderness plain were turned into ashes under this destructive attack. Only some players who were watching on the hillside in the distance escaped by chance. Even so, they were all shocked by this terrifying transformation attack, and everyone was shocked. The huge team of tens of thousands of people was disintegrated by this destructive attack in an instant. The many onlookers were shocked and felt very fortunate that they did not join the plundering battle. On the charred plain, you can still vaguely see ice crystals. Countless players were frozen by the biting ice, their bodies were restricted, and they turned into black embers under the terrifying red flames. A faint sound of footsteps came from the silent plain. Accompanied by the flames that had not yet burned out, a black-robed figure slowly walked out of the deep place. The sky became shaky and dim under this domineering attack. Roar! Holding a blood-colored demon sword surrounded by red flames, the black flames under his feet turned into a giant tiger of the underworld, emitting a shocking tiger roar. Under the attention of the crowd, Mewtwo was so imposing that no one dared to look at him from afar. From this moment on, this domineering figure was deeply imprinted in the minds of countless players and was indelible. No one had ever thought that Mewtwo could survive the joint siege of up to 70,000 players. Among them, there are even seed players trained by several major human bases. Not to mention that he killed everyone with such a powerful force that he could turn the tide. Is this Kuya a genius trained by a superpower? This person's strength and identity in reality must be extraordinary. No one knows his true identity, but all the young awakened people remember this peerless strong man who walked out of the hegemony cave. Since then, a mysterious young man holding a magic knife and blood blade has been circulated in the end of the world. No one knows his real name, only this war made his title widely known. He acts arrogantly and recklessly, his strength is unparalleled, and because of his identity as a person who walked out of the hegemony cave, everyone gave him a taboo title. Hegemon. Hegemon Guyet. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MOCNU. Chapter 350. In the distant valley, the armored army led by Xiao Yuntian stared at the plain that had turned into wasteland, in a daze. So he is so powerful. Jing Jing, a girl with twin ponytails, opened her mouth slightly and exclaimed. Next to her, Xiao Yuntian, who had been silent for a long time, came to his senses and slowly said to the team behind him. Prepare to welcome Fanyan's return. On the hillside on the other side of the plain, the resistance army, who had been prepared for a long time, was also shocked when they saw the scene that looked like a natural disaster in front of them. Luo Ziyuan stared at Mu Qiu's back, and then looked at the black flame giant tiger under him. He asked Mao Yuming beside him. Is that giant tiger also a pet developed by your father? Mao Yuming's father was the developer of the God Domain game back then. Mao Yuming touched the back of his head and shook his head, also with a puzzled look on his face. Not only that tiger, but even the skill that Brother Qiu used, which was like a natural disaster, I have never heard of. By the way, is this really a skill that a player can use? Hearing this, Luo Ziyuan looked at Mu Qiu with a suspicious look. He has increasingly felt that Mu Qiu's identity is not that simple. In a dense forest several kilometers away from the wilderness plain, a shirtless boy stood in the air. The boy had a head of sky blue hair, and his tender face was full of strange lines. Under the boy, there was a large corpse of a huge beast. Looking at the strange phenomenon of heaven and earth emerging in the sky in the distance, it contained an unusually powerful pressure. It seems that this world is not all garbage. In the boy's extremely indifferent pupils, a hint of fanatical fighting spirit flashed, and the corners of his mouth rose. Guyet, right? I'll remember you. After saying that, the boy suddenly raised his white and tender arms, and brilliant lightning flashed in his palms. As the boy clenched his fists slightly, the lightning compressed to the extreme was suddenly released in this space. The galloping lightning exploded instantly, and in the flash, the barrier created by the soul energy could not stop the destruction of thunder at all, and cracks appeared. The space in front of him was torn apart in an instant, and lightning was wrapped around the boy. As the deep blue lightning intertwined, the boy's body continued to grow, turning into a blurred tall figure. I saw that the figure's back was full of strange patterns, and there was a faint light passing over it. Finally, he took a look at the sky that exploded in the distance. With lightning arcs all around him, the man turned around and stepped into the space crack that was torn in front of him, and disappeared. Asshole! In a monitoring room somewhere dark, Long Haoang looked at the domineering figure in the picture and could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. At the moment when the fire dragon appeared, he actually felt a pressure from the depths of his soul. The power of Zilong, it turned out to be you. Long Haoang's face was ferocious, and his eyes were filled with lingering murderous intent. Zilong, it turned out to be you who took it away. That was his hope of advancing to the destruction level, but now it was taken away by the man in front of him. He could forget the death of his confidants, but the loss of Zilong made him unable to let go for a long time. Your heart is not at peace. How can you achieve great things if you continue like this? Suddenly, a low voice came from behind him. Long Haoang was shocked and turned around suddenly. He found that a mysterious man in a red robe and a white mask was standing behind him. Mr. Nightmare. When he saw this mysterious figure, even the unruly Long Haoang lowered his posture unconsciously. We were careless this time. We didn't expect him to appear here. Mr. Nightmare's tone changed, and his voice became as charming as a woman. Long Haoang turned his head and looked at the black-robed figure in the screen, with a fierce light flashing in his eyes. Mr. Nightmare, where did he come from? The nightmare wearing a white mask turned a deaf ear and stared at the screen. He at least took back 60% of his strength in this attack, otherwise the previous move would be enough to tear the soul space apart. This time, his voice became extremely hoarse, like an old man in his twilight years. Long Haoyang's eyes narrowed. How is it possible? Mr. Nightmare is a powerful man of the destruction level, who can so easily shatter the divine space he created. The pale blue pupils looked at Long Haoyang with indifference. At this point, you still don't know his identity, M. Long Haoyang's breathing became a little rapid. Could it be? Yes. Mr. Nightmare turned around, staring at Mu Chiu's back under the mask. This level of power should be the leader of the Eternal Night Dynasty, the overlord of the East Sky Domain, who has been famous recently. The Lord of the Eternal Night is here. Long Haoyang clenched his fists. He actually dared to come to the Zilan base in person. He is really brave. Mr. Nightmare shook his head, and his tone became like a child. Since he did not choose to destroy the divine space, it proves that he must have other plans. The situation has changed. It seems that the plan must be carried out earlier. At the same time, trapping more than 100,000 souls, my nightmare power is about to fail. Long Haoyang nodded. Even Mr. Nightmare could not trap hundreds of thousands of soul energies at the same time. Half a month in the real world was about to reach the limit. A cold light flashed in Long Haoyang's eyes. In this case, if necessary, we can let go of the awakened people in other bases and disconnect their souls. As for the rebels and the Lord of Eternal Night, we must not let them go. Mr. Nightmare nodded slightly. If the scope of trapped souls was narrowed to Zilan base, his pressure would be much less. The container is about to be filled up, but it's a pity for the precious blood power and soul essence of the geniuses in those major bases. Long Haoyang also showed regret. If the soul essence of all the geniuses in those bases could be squeezed dry, it would be a great help to their plan. But it was replaced by a fierce voice. Since those pure soul essences are difficult to refine, then sacrifice the souls of all other players. Oh! Mr. Nightmare was a little confused. If the young geniuses from other bases were removed, there would only be tens of thousands of local residents of Zilan base left. Think about it carefully. These 100,000 humans are the foundation of your Zilan base. Mr. Nightmare's voice was indifferent, as if he only cared about the operation of Zilan base and didn't care about the lives of those 100,000 humans. Long Haoyang said with a gloomy face. As long as we can complete my father's plan, what does it matter if all these humans die? Mr. Nightmare nodded. Then our plan can begin. This time, all the rebels and the Lord of Eternal Night will be buried here. Somewhere in a dark place with no visible edge, a girl in a black gauze skirt closed her eyes. The soft black long hair fell to her waist, and her temperament was cold and quiet, like a princess who was sleeping after being cast a spell. The black silk threads composed of evil spirits weaved into a spider web, and the girl lay quietly here. Suddenly, the girl suddenly opened her closed eyes. The empty pupils were filled with indifference, and the pair of strange purple eyes were so dazzling in the dark space.